Tuesday. Bring it in time with me, Jarod, Hector, and Coach Thorpe. Coach, how are you?
Fantastic, my man. We got a full plate today for sure.
Full plate today for sure. Actually, Judy, I lied. I said no audio or video from me. Completely untrue. The first link is a video. Completely untrue.
Go right to it.
Vegas said the Knicks would win 22.5 games this year. They might double it. Julius Randle might make an All-NBA team for his incredible work, which means the team has a giant decision to make. Do you sign the 26-year-old Randle up for the long haul, trade him while his value's high, or see what unfolds? According to proprietary platform ProFitFX, Randle is outperforming his current deal by 56%. His play is in line with a $29 million per year deal, not the $18.9 he's making. He'll be a free agent in 2022.
If he makes an All-NBA team, he will be eligible for a max extension that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 years at $160 or 5 years at $200 million for a player that'll be 28 at the start of that extension. With RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and Obi Toppin at 20, 21, and 23 respectively, the timelines just don't seem to add up.
And a salary that big comes at the expense of cap space the team might want for a player with more peak years ahead. ProFitFX projections suggest Randle will be past his peak by the time a new deal kicks in. According to every advanced metric, Randle is performing at a career best and by significant margin.
His value may never be higher than it is right now. What's a team to do? The Knicks have been desperate for a player this good for a long time. But is Randle so good you'd use a precious max contract to keep him? Have you thought about who you might trade him for? Part of me wants to say, Knicks fans, enjoy the euphoria of big playoff games at MSG again. You've earned it. Just be happy. Another part of me wants to say enjoy it because his value is too high not to move him. I'd sign him to an extension and then move him for younger players and picks.
The smart money says you have to give yourself as many bites at the apples as possible. Draft and develop young talent and only fall in love with the players who can take you to the promised land.
Playoff fever, Coach Thorpe, is sweeping Gotham City, and it is all about the New York Knicks. I mean, everywhere you go, it's a Knicks hat, a Knicks shirt. Like, Knicks fans are like beside themselves because the team is actually good. They compete, and the playoffs are going to be fun. But they do have a big decision to make, right? Like what to do with Randle, because he's going to make an All-NBA team, and we're going to do our All-NBA teams later, which means he's going to be max contract extension eligible, which means what do you do, right? Like, and I do know this. Leon Rose and William Wesley already know what they're going to do. That decision's already been made. We'll have to wait and see, when it gets revealed to us what that'll be.
Well, I like what you said, where you said, see what unfolds. I don't disagree with your thought. I've been saying this all along. Trade now when you want to trade players when they're at their peak. If you don't project it to go, but it could. I mean, he's just such a unique player, and I've been a big fan for a long time. I think they need to. When you say they know what they're going to do, I think it's on the line of let's see what unfolds. Who can we add to this team without costing us assets, young talent, right? And if the answer is nothing really that can move the needle significantly, then I think you got to consider moving him. And yes, you got to lock him up, right? You got to lock him up. So it's a good position to be in, right? You'd rather be in this position. You got yourself a player that's really good. You can hold on to him. And then you can see, where the chips fall, so to speak. And then regarding playoffs, I just tweeted this out. In the last 5 games, they're shooting 48% from three, some ridiculous number. Maybe it's 46. But they're only 18th in 3 points attempted. And then the last 15 games. Oh yeah, they're number one last 5 games, and the number one last 15 games, lower than low 40s, but still number one. But they're way down 22nd in threes attempted per game. Yeah. So what to me that means is, all right, we can make a strategy adjustment here. We are the best shooting team going into this postseason if it continues these last 3 weeks or 2 weeks ago or so. Do we start taking more threes? Because when you think about variance, it's a better variance when you're the one making more of the threes. That might be a significant change for them. Or do you just stick with what you've been doing, which is great, except you're not playing the bad team in the East anymore in the playoffs. So you need to be able to have another weapon. I think that that's what the Jazz did last year.
Yep.
In the bubble, they had all the pandemic break. I think Thibodeau should double down on threes and just let that motherfucker fly. and play defense and see what happens.
I mean, they are a top 5 defense, and as you know, in the playoffs, that matters, right? Defense travels, as the old saying goes.
Yeah.
And coach, if they win their first round matchup, oh my God,
which they could. They're gonna maybe play the Hawks,
right?
Maybe play the Celtics, right? They're not up for a 3 seed.
No,
they're likely a 4 seed, right?
They're the 4 seed right now.
Hawks Celtics.
A second round matchup against the Brooklyn Nets. Holy hell, this city's gonna lose its godforsaken mind.
I just started thinking about that.
Don't miss the game in that series, because it's gonna be nuts.
I was wondering where you were going, because I didn't think for a second who the next round would be, but because I don't know if they'll get by the first round. We'll see. But if they do, oh, that'd be so great for basketball. I'm all for it.
So great.
I love the city, so I can't wait to go back and visit again. And maybe I would go to a game up there. I'm vaccinated now.
Yeah. It's woo. Anyway, we got a couple weeks to go before that happens.
Yeah.
And speaking of vaccinations, let's talk about the United States and where we are as it relates to vaccinations. President Joe Biden addressed Congress and the nation earlier this week. And during his first 100 days, one of his goals was 100 million vaccinations, right? Well, he surpassed that early on in his 100 days, right? And we're up over 200 million people vaccinated. Now, I want to be clear about something. It is 200 million vaccinations, which means that's a combination of first shots and second shots, not full vaccinations.
Right.
But we're at about 92 million in full vaccinations, which in a nation of about 320 million, we're not quite at half yet, right? But we're getting there. And I think that was a huge thing. And I think President Biden needs to be celebrated and applauded for that, because that was a major deal, especially considering the way in which we botched the virus handling of the pandemic in the first place. Now, of course, that wasn't Joe, that was his predecessor, but you know, we're doing much better now. The next step for him is we need to now make it readily available and easily accessible for everybody with education, right? I'm thinking mobile vans and clinics where you're teaching, right? Because that's the thing. There's so much misinformation that exists out here. And I know you're going to talk about someone later, Coach, who put out nonsense in the world. And because he's popular, people believe it. And it's like, we shouldn't go to our news sources for who's popular. Popularity doesn't matter when it comes to facts. I don't care if you're popular or not. I want to know, is this a factual statement you are making? And I don't care if a celebrity says it. I want to know what scientist, what doctor, what does the CDC, what does the WHO, what do people who matter say about X? And again, kudos to President Biden for pushing this. And we definitely need to see more and more vaccines happening for people who live in parts of the country that we don't think about, that are, you know, rural parts that are far away from hospitals and medical clinics and things of that nature. We need to make it accessible for all those people as well.
Just to finalize those great thoughts is Biden ain't spiking the ball and calling touchdown either.
Right.
India did in January, and they've lost more people this year than all of 2020. Think about that. They thought it was over. Hey, celebrate. Biden and his people have not celebrated. Like, hey, we're making progress. This is what it's supposed to look like. Otherwise, it looks like Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings are always looking to celebrate some kind of parade of something. Hey, we won a game by 11 points. Meanwhile, we know what's really happening. The moral is, don't be the Sacramento Kings. All right, so for my first bit of today, let's play jazz. We've got to call out our boy Henry Abbott, who's just riding this. Judy described it. I think she called it bummer sauce. I think Judy's what Judy said. And it is just this whirlwind tour of just the ugliest aspects of humanity. Not just American humanity by any stretch. His last two pieces yesterday and today about Adnan Khashoggi, but it really doesn't matter what the names are. The reality is, Jarod, as you talk about all the time, and we just were talking on fair about this, I think a lot of us have tried to live a life where we don't want to deal with all of these terrible things happening around us because it just weighs you down. The reality is some Americans have no option. Some people in the world have no option. The horribleness is all over them every day, all day, because of how horrible the world can be. Many of us have been more lucky and we don't have to deal with that so much. So we choose to ignore it. It's a big mistake. And so the reason people ask me, why is Henry writing about all of this crazy shit going on in the world? And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you need to subscribe to TrueHoop. Read what Henry's doing before it becomes a TV show on Netflix or a movie or a world-class podcast or all of the above, because it's coming. The reason why it's so important and why he's writing about it while being the founder of a basketball media company is because our owners have a connection to that world. He's not saying any one of them are breaking these kinds of laws, but they all travel in the same circles, and they pass legislation that affects us. They support legislation, I should say, that affects us. They partner with people whose lives are affect what we do every day. We need to wake up. Simple as that. There is a whole world going on that is a fucking mess. And those of us who have an ability to communicate certain things and act on certain things, we need to pay attention to what's going on to keep the ship from running right into the iceberg, because that's where it's headed.
Yeah, to follow up on that, first of all, and I say this all the time about TrueHoop, come for the basketball, stay for the tangled web that is the capitalist machine. I was fortunate as a kid, my dad, even though I watched as much TV as possible and he didn't like that, he would always make me watch news programs and have the radio on. And if we'd be in the car driving somewhere, like ad nauseum, listening to radio shows about just world events. And Adnan Khashoggi is a name I've known since I was probably 3 years old. Okay. Wow. Because that's just like stuff on the news and Iran-Contra. And I'm like, I was just well versed in that sort of thing. And, the reality of it is that, as you said, Coach, these billionaires travel in safe circles. When you're talking about planes, arms, drugs on a behemoth scale, I'm not talking about a local drug dealer or someone who runs drugs for a city. No. I'm talking about behemoth, a scale you can't imagine. The amount of people involved in that is very limited by nature, right? Because you have to have access to planes and governments. That's not regular people. That's just not how that works. So it's a very small pool. So it would stand to reason that all people who travel in those circles know each other, right? Our people who can afford to buy NBA teams. Again, that is a small amount of people who have $5 billion or access to $5 billion to buy a basketball team. Of course, they know people that are related to Jeffrey Epstein, that are connected to Ghislaine Maxwell. It's all this disgusting world. And as you mentioned, Coach, they affect and do things that impact us, right? Because their goal is all about consolidating their wealth, making it continue to grow, and keeping power limited amongst that small group at the expense of everybody else, because that is how you amass fortunes that big, right? I say it all the time. There's a saying that everyone knows: behind every fortune is a crime. You cannot access or amass that amount of capital without doing illegal, fucked up shit. That's just how it works. And the collateral damage is us, regular people. We're the ones that are you get the shit end of the stick. And really make sure you guys check out Henry's piece, because I think, as Coach said, it might turn into a show, a podcast, amazing stuff.
It's amazing.
All right, we are going to talk basketball. And I was thinking about MVPs the other day, not in the whole the constant silly chatter, but if you're doing top 5, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Coach, if you finish in the top 5, that has contract ramifications for you. Much like how if you make an All-NBA, that makes you max extension eligible. I think finishing the top 5 also does something really good for you. Anyway, I thought we could debut our top 5. I think we're all pretty sold on who one is, right? And I think it's Jokic. And again, I've said it before, he may not be the best player in the world, but he's been the best player in the NBA this season. And I think that's been pretty obvious. I have Joel Embiid, number 2 on my ballot. Controversial, I got Giannis as number 3 on my ballot. Because, kind of doing the same shit he's been doing. I get it. He hasn't performed in the postseason, but this is a regular season award. So it doesn't matter that he flamed out last postseason. Doing well again in this regular season. Another crazy name coming up here. 4th on my list, Julius Randle. Holy hell. Look at those numbers. Knicks are 4th, man. And he's a large reason for it. And 5th, even though his team is terrible, you cannot ignore the offensive output. It's Curry. It's just you just can't. It's just he's putting up ridiculous numbers, and that's the only reason why that team is 500. If he wasn't there, they'd be worse than the Timberwolves. So those are my top 5 for MVP right now.
I'll visit mine when we talk about the all-league players. But to Bilal, the doc just mentioned Chris Paul. Yeah, he's going to get consideration for what he's doing. Although I'm not sure he's the best player on his own team because Booker's been so good. By the way, I also saw that the good doc recommended John Malkovich as Henry in the movie. I am only going to, not that I'll be in the movie, but if I was, just please don't cast Seth Rogen as me or Jonah Hill, the two Jewish looking guys, please, neither. All right, so tonight we have the battle for number one. We have Phoenix hosting Utah to extend a common theme. Dario Saric is out, Jake Crowder's out, Donovan Mitchell's out. I don't know if Mike Conley's playing. He was not listed today as out, but he didn't play last game, and I listened to the game, and that he had a hammy injury that he had before. So maybe he doesn't play either. So it's not quite the battle of the behemoths at full capacity. But nonetheless, we have two small market teams in the last 2 weeks of the season playing for the top seed in the better conference. And I think it's great. And I listened to, I think I listened to Zach Lowe's pod recently. Yeah, it was Zach's. Yesterday I listened to it where he was saying how many executives have said to him how devastated they are from a holistic perspective that Jamal Murray is out. Because there was another, we might have had a top three, we still might, but it's unlikely now, a top three seed in the West, all being the smaller market teams, right? When we say small markets, like Denver's a small city, but in LA, Chicago, New York, right? So Salt Lake City is pretty small. Phoenix, relatively small. So I think it's great. I think watch the game with my son tonight, which is exciting for me. We've been watching games every night, but this is for number one. So both these teams are terrific in the postseason. The West is so good, Jarod, they could lose in the first round. I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't be shocked. But nonetheless, they play good basketball. They play the modern game. Both teams do. And I think it's exciting that we still don't know who's going to win the West. And it's unlikely to be anyone but a small market team. I think it's cool.
Stay tuned. Next week's TrueHoop TV video about the Phoenix Suns. Okay.
Nice.
So Golden State had a tough loss to Minnesota last night, and they're in this weird state where I feel like we've gotten mixed messages all year from them, right? Beginning of the season, Steve Kerr said, I'm not going to be chasing wins. Midway point, right? Maybe back a little while ago, Draymond Green said, getting amped up for the play-in game doesn't excite me. All right, but I assume you guys want to make the play-in, right? And losing to Minnesota last night, 4.5 back of the 6th spot. They're 3.5 behind the 7. And now, with that loss to Minnesota last night, they're only 3 games up in the loss column on the Pelicans, with 2 games to play against New Orleans to go this season.
Wow.
That matters. And it's just, again, I wonder, how much of it is, okay, the roster is what it is, but man, did you get so used to eating that Kobe beef and living the high life at the Ritz-Carlton? Now you're like, Holiday Inn, not so great. Like, hey man, like this is regular life in the NBA, dudes. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And it was a bad loss. They got killed and out rebounded, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. But Golden State, man, like, and I know again, no Clay, I get all that, but come on, guys. Like Andrew Wiggins, Steph, Draymond, like you got to be able to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves in a game you have to win.
They beat the Jazz twice too. The Jazz were missing players, but still, they're definitely playing a little bit better. I think they're just a little healthier, and Cat's playing well. Anthony Edwards is super talented. We knew that, right? He's super. He'll take. I was watching the game. He was just taking crazy shots.
Oh yeah,
he makes them sometimes, and that's just
no fear. He has no fear.
No, he definitely has no fear for sure. All right, so my third thing is just way off the beaten path, but it's I don't know if you on Twitter this morning. I was up at 2 and then at probably 4:30 for good, and I get on Twitter and I see Mel Brooks is trending. Now I'm a Mel Brooks fan, old school Mel Brooks fan, and my heart sank. I'm like, oh Lord, when you're upper 80s, 90s, like that can't be good. Turns out he's just fine. I don't know why he was trending, but everyone reacted the way I reacted. So I wanted to tell a quick story. Jody, I just put a picture that I had up there with his now deceased wife, Anne Bancroft, who's famous for being in the movie The Graduate, lovely woman who you would never would have imagined would have married Mel Brooks. Not, I would say, in terms of physical attraction, ranking as high as Anne Bancroft probably did in her prime. But I read an article, I think it was New York Times, many years ago, Jarod, and she was asked about their longtime marriage. And she admitted, like any married couple, as long as they've been married, we had our problems, especially two people in Hollywood. She said, and I'll never forget this, it's really been like the theme of my life as a husband. She said, I just know this, when I heard the key in the door at the end of a work day, because she'd be home in their apartment in New York, and she said, I knew the party was about to start. And it really hit me. Right then, it kind of crystallized for me a role I can play in the life of my wife, which is, I am not Mel Brooks. I'm not nearly as funny or creative or talented like that, but I can make sure she smiles a lot more than she would otherwise and has just a more fun life. And that's exactly what I vowed to do. And I thought of this, I've been thinking about this for many years, but in this pandemic, it has been a constant theme in the morning or at night. Like, how can I make sure my wife is smiling? Because it ain't easy. And our kids were gone, right? And so that's why I panicked this morning when I read about Mel Brooks trending. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. So in this pandemic, which we're not out of yet, as Jarod pointed out initially, we have a lot more vaccines to go, and there's a lot of fucking stubborn people out there. If we can bring smiles and laughter to the people we love in our life, we're doing a good. I'm not a religious man, but if I was, I'd say you're doing the Lord's work. Help people smile, help people laugh, find a way for them to enjoy their life, which isn't so easy to enjoy right now. And I think we're a long way towards being happier people overall. So that's my testament to Mel Brooks.
No, it's well said, Coach, and that's a huge part, right? If you can bring joy and laughter and smile to somebody else's face, like, that's a huge thing. I mean, obviously for them, but you get eventually benefits from it as well, right? Like, wonderful for everybody. So it's just
yeah. I knew I was on the right path the other day when my wife, with our kids home, it's like I had a meeting with our kids the other day. The day after they came home, I brought them in the room. I have a lot of meetings. I'm a coach. That's why we named our show Bring It In. This is what we do. We bring it in. So I brought it in with just the two of them. And I just said, listen, motherfuckers, basically, like my wife and I, your mom and I have had a great year without you. Great. Shockingly so, maybe, in a pandemic, but we really like each other's company. Life is easy. We got a dog. We rescued a dog, and that hasn't fucked things up too much. Like, don't you fuck things up now. Like, I put them on call, right? And so she texted me the other day. She's like, I miss you. Can we have a date soon? Because we're back to dealing with the damn kids all the damn time. We can't wait for them to send them out again. So yeah, we have a couple of dates lined up for this weekend because it's getting hot in Florida. So we got maybe a couple more days we can go eat outside and not, lose 8 pounds of water weight. But it's just a few more days, and then the furnace is on, and then it's beach dates every night.
Oh, I mean, boo-hoo. Everybody feel bad for Coach and his beach days. So come on, like.
It's warm, but it's warm everywhere these days, isn't it? Like, it's not. I know it snowed in Ohio a couple weeks ago. That made me laugh.
No snow up here. It's like, what's it today? Probably 60-something today. It's not terrible. It's
nice.
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
I got my air cranking here. All right, we got some good topics to discuss, Jarod.
We do. Well, let's jump in on you had Ted Cruz at the top. So let's talk about that, and then we can go into that mess of a person talking about COVID vaccine after Ted Cruz.
Oh, good. Yeah. So these are Ted Cruz's own words, and as I was reading the article, which was quoting him, I just kept thinking of you, because this man admitted in his own words in an editorial, I think in the Wall Street Journal, that he's sick of taking money from big companies. Like, this is what he wrote. And not only is he sick of that, he's sick of letting it dictate his policies, what he supports. I'm not going to even read you can look it up if you want to. Just know that he has admitted what Jarod has been preaching about for a year. I'm bringing it in now, right? The so-called, his words, the best band ever, the Cowboys Machine. It does depend on legislation to support it. Otherwise, it'd be law breaking. Not that they don't find a way to sometimes do that too. This is a senator from a very big, powerful state admitting, oh yeah, we looked the other way when Coke owes $12 billion in taxes. Oh, by the way, I have no idea what he's lying about, Ted Cruz. Why would I ever believe him? Right. But this is believable, right? It's believable, the things he talks about when Boeing asked for billions in corporate welfare or whatever. Yeah, I think he's probably telling the truth. And I also don't think he's telling the truth that he won't be accepting more money. Right. It'll be from different people.
Exactly. Ted Cruz is angling himself for whatever his next step is.
Right, exactly. Right.
I don't believe a word that dude says. All he does is literally lie. That is his job. I mean, it ties into what, the stuff that Henry's writing about and the tentacles and the layers to which the money goes, right? I mean, it's everywhere. And that's really, again, I go back to The Wire, right? Lester Freeman's famous line, right? If you follow the money, that will actually tell you where everything is happening and what decisions are going to be made. And again, the people who are impacted the most on the negative end from that are us, the regular people who aren't at those, billion-dollar tables. We talked about the COVID vaccine up at the top. And I know that Joe Rogan, who's a popular person, who's a very popular podcast, went on and said some things. I know you wanted to discuss that, Coach.
Yeah. So first of all, I didn't know who Joe Rogan was until very, very recently. Nothing against him. He's allowed to be an entertainer. Once Howard Stern said Rush Limbaugh stole my act, I used to do the super conservative guy. I don't know what the truth is, but Stern did say this long, long ago. I mean, decades ago, he accused Limbaugh of basically stealing his act. You're allowed to have an act. If that's what you want to do to make your money, Candace Owens has an act, right? Sean Hannity has an act. This is their shtick, as we say in the Jewish world, the Yiddish world. And I would never do it because it hurts people, but they seem to like the money they make and the popularity they have. But we're at a point, Jarod, and this is something Henry and I talk about all the time. I feel like, I've said this on the show, I think once before, but there's places, there's media companies that cover sports and culture and sports and entertainment. It's all the same kind of thing. And I feel like at TrueHoop, first of all, we are engaged to the truth. We embrace the truth. It's in the name for a reason. Henry's written about why it's called TrueHoop. He and I have talked about this. He is absolutely married to the idea that we need to be truthful and honest about everything that we do. But we're at a stage now, Jarod, where I feel like athletes are becoming very powerful, which is fantastic, and wanting to engender change. And it's not just the Ali and Bill Russell and Jim Brown, very, very heroic. But I think we're going to trickle it down to, Jaylen Brown isn't those guys, but he's very vocal, right? Lloyd Pierce isn't those guys. He was very vocal. So we're going to see more of that, not less, especially as they assert themselves more in the power structures, the foundational power structures of America. And so media companies need to follow along, in my opinion, and we are doing that. So if other companies are the marriage of sports and culture and entertainment, we're not ignoring culture and entertainment, but we're definitely trying to merge sports and politics because it's happening very much so, right in front of our eyes. So to Joe Rogan's comments about young people, I have two almost 20-year-olds in my home, right? So when he's talking about they don't need the vaccine, and I'm reading about Jason Tatum still using an inhaler before games, right? And I know some other people who've been adversely affected by COVID who are also young and healthy and athletes. They weren't Jason Tatum, but they're athletes. And I know this man's a fucking fool. And then he came out, I guess, the other day and walked back what he was saying. Because of course he did. I really don't think he's a terrible person like some people are. We at TrueHoop, you included, of course, we may be wrong, but we're not going to be wrong to get clicks and get attention. It's like scientists are wrong too. Right. We are trying to apply the truth as best we can. We're trying to talk to people more intelligent and more in the know than us, and that's how we form our opinions. And we have no pride. If we have to change our opinion because the facts tell us to, we will. I don't think the Lakers, Jarod, are going to compete for a championship, which is why I published the article I did earlier this week. If Anthony Davis becomes the Anthony Davis and not the imposter he is now, if LeBron is possible, which is still proving the best player in the world, I will absolutely change my mind. I'm allowed to. That's my job. I read the tea leaves. I say what I think, but I ain't going to lie for anybody. And I know neither are you, and neither is Judy, and neither is Henry. We're committed to the truth, and Tom, and we need this because there's too many Joe Rogans out there who are looking to just gain clicks and followers and don't give a fuck what the truth is.
Without question. And it's so well said, Coach. The thing about what we do at TrueHoop and the truth is on your path to discovering the truth, as you said, you may start out with an idea or a belief or a position about something. But again, as you're on that path to discovering the truth, you find out, oh, this is what it is, right? And that changes, right? You said it doesn't make you a bad person or whatever. It's, I believed X based upon this set of information that I have. Now, upon deeper discovery and really finding out, oh, this is actually the case, right? Like, and I think that's this position now. We live in this world where everyone's either or, this, that, and it's just it's this echo chamber we live in. And there's a base of people that love to hear that sort of thing, so it works. It rounds them all up. It's like there's so much misinformation about, first of all, how vaccines even work. Like, and there's conversations I have with people, and I'm like, so you really don't understand how a vaccine works, do you? This is what the conversation that we're having is eliciting. And I'm like, okay, let's like really try to go back and like explain to people what they are, right? Vaccines aren't preventative measures, right? It doesn't mean you're not going to get the thing. It means you're likely not going to die from the thing. And I always go back to polio, right? When the polio vaccine was created, people didn't stop getting polio, they stopped dying from polio. Like that's what happened. And then eventually when you get herd immunity after many years, right? Things change, but that's how it works. And especially with COVID, we're learning as we go, right? Like this is it's been called a novel coronavirus for a reason, because it's new. So every however long, every month or week or whatever, scientists are like, oh, did you know that this also can happen? And there's this weird thing happening with people and their inability to understand experimentation and how science works. That's how science works, people. Like you start with a hypothesis. Oh, certain things work out. Oh, that's not it. Go back to the drawing board. Here's my new hypothesis. Oh, we got down the hole this far. Ooh, that's not right. We go back to the drawing board again. Like it's a consistent process of going back, refining until we finally get to some semblance of conclusion. But that's down the road. And on the way, things change. And I feel like people are like bonkers about it. And I don't get it.
I don't know if I've ever said this on the show, but it's commentary I've talked about frequently. I bet I have talked about it, where Malcolm Gladwell wrote about the food tester for Prego tomato sauce. Do you know about this? So it's a pretty famous story in one of his books, where Prego was getting killed in the tomato sauce race against a ragu, despite them being convinced we definitely have, without any question, the better tasting tomato sauce. We're losing badly. They hired some famous food tester who began testing, I think, Americans on what kind of tomato sauce they like. And, because they were talking about, our tomato sauce sticks to the pasta, ragu doesn't, yet they sell 8 times more than we do, whatever. And so this famous tester, and Gladwell does TED Talks about this too, but he wrote about this in the book. The tester came back, he said, listen, I've learned that there are Americans can be divided pretty neatly into 3 categories. People who like regular tomato sauce, people who like extra spicy tomato sauce, people who like extra chunky. Those 3 things. So Prego basically said, wait a second. There's regular tomato sauce anywhere. We're getting killed in that. There is extra spicy tomato sauce everywhere. We're getting killed in that. You're telling us a good portion of Americans, maybe it's a third, maybe it's a quarter, prefer extra chunky, and no one's making it anywhere? He's like, well, my job wasn't to tell you what's not being made. I'm just telling you what they want. Prego started making extra chunky, and they've never looked back. They're way ahead of ragu. And now, as I told my wife this story the other day, while I was telling the kids this, I think in any nice grocery store, you'll see 25 kinds of tomato sauce, because they've realized we can't just do 3 anymore. We're trying to get more of a market share, right? And so what I've always said, Jarod, is as it relates to what you were just talking about, there is a segment of the population that wants the truth and we're willing to see change. There's a segment of the population that doesn't want anything but entertainment. We don't want to know the truth. We don't need to know. We don't care. We're not watching the news anyway. And then there's a segment that likes every fucking crazy conspiracy theory or anything that supports their own judgment that basically white people are the best people in the world, everyone else sucks. And that's what Fox did. And that's what Newsmax did. They are saying, wait a second, there's 2/3 almost of the country, and they're fighting between CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post. They're all fighting all these for that group. But there's another couple 100 million, let's call 50 million, 45 million active, and they have no one servicing them. We're going to service them. And we just have to make shit up and keep getting more and more extreme. And I think it relates to sports too in this way. And I know you know this well. There's a segment of sports consumers who want the well-written analysis, right? There's a segment that thinks that everything against my team is crazy bullshit because my team's the best. Everyone else sucks. There's the other segment that's just all false machismo, bravado. It was better in my day. Dr. J said LeBron. I mean, he's not alone in that, Jarod, right?
No.
That there is a segment of the population, not just former player, just old people who think that it was way tougher for them and everyone else sucks. And so if you want to create content for those people, just like Fox News, you're going to have it, right? We're all the same ilk where we just want the truth. We want the smartest thing and we'll make our own mind up from there, right?
Exactly. Just give us the smart analysis. And again, we will ascertain, but that's ultimately too what these organizations, whether it be Fox News, what the government prides themselves on, right? They know the person who's consuming their stuff isn't going to fact check. They know that. So they're like, why do we have to say whatever? Because you ain't going to fact check what I'm saying. That's the right. So it's like, I'm just going to say whatever I want and you're just going to follow along. But we are that group. It's like, well, no, actually, I'm going to fact check. Let me go look into that. Let me go see where I can get more info.
If you watched my wife and I before our kids were back and when Trump was still president, we would watch Rachel Maddow as much as we could at 9:00. And all we do was press pause because my wife was half watching, half not. I'm pausing it and looking shit up because she was saying some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure, okay, what's a link to that? I would say this because I like to know what is the real truth. Mm-hmm. And I started watching her more when I realized mostly she's right. If she wasn't right, I wouldn't be watching her anymore.
Yeah.
And she's been doing what Henry is doing in his 11, I think it's 11 segments now. Yeah. Like she's putting together some crazy dots, you know? Yes. All right, let's talk some hoops. We
talk hoops.
Yeah, let's go with we want to talk about who you think is on the championship bus.
Let's finish the Warriors point first.
Oh, yeah.
I think this ties in. So
oh, yes.
Minnesota had 68 rebounds last night.
Did they really?
Yeah. I was like, whoa. I mean, it was crazy. And Steve Kerr after the game talked about failure to box out and attention to detail in the modern NBA. And I know you definitely have thoughts as a coach about this. I wonder if we have gone too far in one direction now, right? Like especially we made a video. I made a video in my first one, I think, was about illegal defense rule, right? How we can bring that back in. That'll help some of the scoring, whatever, because we are seeing just absurd numbers and it's just everything's looking a little bit out of whack. And to me, I think we've skewed a bit too far in one direction. Now, I am not hankering for the days of 1990s basketball where you gum it up and it's like 88. No, I don't want that. Right? Like that's just awful. But there's got to be some happy medium somewhere where you can have offenses flowing, but you can also credit and reward defenses. And the whole idea about rebounding and boxing out, right? I think a lot of that is connected to this idea, right? Because that doesn't make SportsCenter. No one cares if you box out for that doesn't get you on the top. But Kawhi Leonard said famously, board man gets paid, right? Like, and so, the fundamental skills of the game, like boxing out, right? Those things matter, especially as we now get towards the playoffs, and possessions matter ever so much more in these situations.
All right, so I watched part of the game last night with Max, and I think I know exactly where his quote came from when he said, guys don't box out anymore. He was really upset. There was a play in the game, one play that we saw where two of his guys probably should have had a rebound. I think it was Hernan Gomez, Juancho, I think he got it. Just kind of out-toughed him for the ball. And then they scored. The Wolves scored. Kerr called timeout. He pointed to the referee, meaning timeout. He didn't do the timeout. He pointed. And then he did some kind of jig, like, woo! And I paused it and rewound it and said, Max, do you see that? Like, that is a pissed off Steve Kerr. And then after the game, we talked about not boxing out. I think there's a connection there. But the other day, I heard Jeff Van Gundy talking to our buddies Jack McCallum and Jay Adonde and Zach Lowe for Jack and Jay's podcast about the Redeem Team, which is quite interesting, actually. And Jeff Van Gundy was lamenting that he literally just said the words 3 times. Nobody boxes out anymore. That's what he said. Well, Jarod, I call bullshit on that. Same thing I do with Rachel Maddow if I don't like something she says, right? Which is not all that frequently, that's for sure. I watch games every night. probably as much as anyone does on the planet, maybe more than most, right? I see boxing out all the time. In fact, I listened to Jeff say that. I walked inside my office because I was walking my dog, listening to a podcast, and I had 3 TVs on, and I think I picked 6 box outs in 11 seconds. All right. But remember, guys that go to box out don't always get the rebound. Depends on where the ball goes. But they're just making sure the bad guys don't get it. At least the bad guy closest to me. And so then you try to rebound as a team. So you got to keep out the best rebounder. Fine. My issue is I don't think we're paying those box out guys. Right, we're trying to pay the guy that always gets the board, who isn't boxing out. And also, as coaches, Steve Kerr, you're a great coach. You have lots of, I think, juice in Golden State. Who's firing you when you yell at a guy? Yell at him. Because tell you what, the best way to motivate a player is to sit him down. Especially in the NBA. You don't get paid if you don't play. You don't play, you don't get paid, period. You don't box out, you're coming out. They'll start rebounding more. Now, if they try and still fail, well, you got to find somebody else. That guy's not good enough. But if they're not even trying, well, you got to coach them up on that. So I think that he's lamenting the lack of some fundamentals. Yeah, in part that's true, and that's a whole nother. We could do a podcast just on that. But we can demand more from guys, but we also can reward the guys that are doing it and just don't get rewarded for it because it isn't pretty. It's an uglier part of the game, right? And you don't pad your stats that way.
Yeah. And so in that regard, coach, right? Like coaches always talk about gang rebounding, right? And that's part of what that means, right? It's not just gagging everyone going for the ball. It's okay, you box out, you get the ball, right? Like it's working collectively. And I think some teams sometimes, fall into a little bit of a lull with that because they've got a great big man rebounder, right? They've got a Rudy Gobert or an Embiid or Drummond, and it's like, he's got it. I don't got to worry about that, And I think to your point, that's not the boxing out. There's no, I'm sure someone counts a stat for that, but it isn't a highlight anywhere, right? No one looks and goes, oh, nobody box out you had last night. The coach does, but that isn't what gets talked about on NBA Twitter.
Right. Teams are probably tracking it. Maybe the NBA certainly could. I guarantee a Second Spectrum can track it. For sure they track it. It's just got to be important. It's not as important as it needs to be. Coaches can start that, I think. And it leads me to the point I wanted to make about Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. So Beal's not quite the same age as those other guys, but if we forget how competitive the majority of the NBA players are, I think this is to Steve Kerr's. I think this is where his upset is coming from, where his anger is coming from. This is a competitive sport. Like, these guys want to crush you. I watched the Wizards beat the Lakers, and you would have thought it was a playoff game. LeBron, AD played pretty well, but without LeBron, the Lakers are just okay, right? Especially if AD just plays all right. It mattered to Russell Westbrook. Like, he was into it. And we see what Chris Paul did in OKC last year. I think Phoenix, and I've written about this, Phoenix was already doing better in the bubble last year. And now here they are. Chris Paul definitely clearly is an MVP candidate, or at least an all-league candidate. We need guys like that. There's a reason why you are so good at what you do beyond just talent. You have to really care. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the guys that just want to look good and live the NBA life and aren't willing to sacrifice, they're not going to last long. And they shouldn't. That's how you lose games.
Yeah.
The guys that play the competitive, ugly, physical brand when it's required, mm-hmm. that leads to winning games. And so that toughness, that desire matters. Mm-hmm. And I give credit to those guys showing, like, you don't age out of that. Like, you may lose it physically, but the emotion to fight is there for a long time.
Think about a team like Washington, right? Clearly all year, their record says what they are. And there's a large enough sample size for that. However, you don't want that team in round one of the playoffs. You got basically an all-NBA backcourt coming at you. Now, if you're Brooklyn or Philly, you'll probably beat them anyway, but they're going to make it harder than you want it to be, right? Because Bradley Beal and Russ can win games by themselves. We've seen it. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
And so, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with the Wizards. Quick championship bus update. So, Coach, for a while, I'm like, all right, Lakers are good. They got their spot. But, I've been watching them. I read your piece, and they're like in the middle of the bus right now. Like, they might be off real early. I think the front of the bus is where the front of the bus is, right? There's still Utah, it's still Phoenix, Brooklyn, Philly, Milwaukee, right? Those
Clippers.
Yep, those teams are at the front of the bus. And then you know who's like not too far behind them is playing Denver. I'm like, Denver's still winning games. I worry about the Murray thing, but I'm like, you're still winning, and they still got Jokic, so they're like in that row right behind. We're still not sure. But the Lakers, no, they're not by the front of the bus anymore. They're somewhere in the middle, and they may get off at the first stop. I don't know.
I'm glad you see it the way I see it, because that's I don't ever, I should rephrase this. I commonly, when I decide to write about something, I don't know what I'm going to find. So for example, this weekend I'm studying the Sixers. I don't know what I'm going to find. I might have some leanings, but you've never met a guy that has less pride in what he writes about than me. I just want to be right. Like I don't care. I want to be right at the moment. And so I thought I might be excited about the Lakers because they're collectively, Caruso's shooting better. KCP is recovered from a bad month last month. Kuzma, I actually think is a pretty good player. And I thought, you know what? Just what you said, like they're going to get AD back and LeBron's LeBron, and these motherfuckers are not winning again. That's what I thought when I first dove into the data and watching tape. When I was done, I'm like, oh man, they got him shot. And then I talked to Henry. I said, Henry, the Clippers are going to smoke him. He's like, put that in your article, which I forgot to do. He did it for me. Yeah, so right. I just don't see it. But I love that you mentioned Denver because I think you're right. If they didn't have Jokic and they were winning games without Murray, right, I'd be way less excited about that. But they got the best player in the world right now. Someone wrote, I don't remember, might have been one of your friends that did it too, but they had a funny European, Serbian sounding name to Wilt Chamberlain, like Wiltage Chamberlainich or whatever it was, right? Because his numbers in April look like Wilt Chamberlain's numbers. Yeah, he's a joke. He's the MVP. It should be unanimous in my opinion. It should be unanimous. I really think that.
He's on fire right now. I'm loving what he's doing, and yeah, that's where the bus sits right now. I think since we're talking about that and Jokic, let's jump to our All NBA teams, Coach.
Yeah.
You go first. Who's on your All NBA first team?
This is as of now, because we have a month to go, right? 3 weeks to go, 2.5 weeks to go, and I am penalizing in a COVID year. Availability matters more than ever. Okay. So I think Jokic has to be on there because he's the MVP of the league. I've got Curry on there because he's just beyond incredible. Although I understand the argument against it because of his team, but these are individual honors, right? I've got Giannis. You mentioned him. Luka's been unbelievable, and his team's a solid top 6 playoff team. And then I think I have the upset. His team's not any good, but Zion Williamson has just been phenomenal. His numbers, look at his EPM.
Yeah.
He's been phenomenal. Solid on defense, extraordinary on offense. Without him, they're right there with OKC at one of the worst teams in the league.
Worse than that.
Worse than that, right. So I've got Zion on my first team, in part because some of the other guys that might make it haven't played as many games. Yeah. Or their team isn't any better than his team, barely, and they're not as impressive. So I've got Jokic. My guards are, I hate doing it by position. I guess you're supposed to.
You have to, yeah.
Jokic is my center. Curry and Luka are my guards. Giannis and Zion are my forwards.
Yeah. So, that's the way that, unfortunately, All NBA voting goes. You have to go 1 center, 2 forwards, 2 guards. I think we should get to a point where we eliminate positions for All NBA.
For sure.
If it's a year where the 5 best players are 5 guards, then it's 5 guards.
I agree.
Anyway, so I'm with you. Jokic, clearly my starting center on team 1. Giannis, and I have Julius Randle as my starting forward on team 1. My guards are Curry, and Doncic is listed as the guard, so he is on first team. Even though it's so unfair, I'm like, he's looking really like a point forward guard / I don't know, whatever. Anyway, that's team 1. Go with your team 2, Coach.
So everyone has Joel Embiid at center, team 2. I know you do. I get it. But again, he's played 43 games, I think. I couldn't put him over Rudy Gobert. He's played 61 games on the best team in the league. You're not as stupid for having Embiid there, that's for sure. I also have Donovan Mitchell as my guard there with Damian, because they've just been incredible. Donovan is, the Jazz have been the best team since like week 3 until tonight. We'll see if they lose tonight, then they're tied with Phoenix. But Mitchell's been incredible. Dame's been amazing. I've got Paul George, which was not easy because he's not played a ton of games. I think he's played more than Kawhi. And then, I mean, I'm not that different than you. I had Julius as my second team forward. So I had Zion on my first team. Julius Randle's my second team. And guess what? Give it 2.5 more weeks. Julius might work. I mean, they're hot as a firecracker, and he's amazing. So, yeah I've got, I mean, people probably have Kawhi in there. CP deserves mention for sure. And maybe I should have CP over Damian, but I mean, not Damian, over Donovan. But I feel like the Jazz have 2 second teamers. It's fair for what they've done this year.
Yeah, so second team, and I'm the worst. I'm going to disrespect the Jazz and keep all their guys on the third team. Sorry, Utah. I know it's terrible. But second team, Embiid, of course, starting center. I got the Clipper boys. Kawhi and PG as my forwards. Like, I mean, yes, Kawhi played a little bit less than Paul George, but damn, when they played, they've been awesome. And my guards, CP3 and Dame, and like they've been incredible. I mean, I know Portland's been kind of, but Phoenix, I mean, he's a big reason why. All right, third team.
So third team it sounds a lot like your second team. My guards are Chris Paul and Harden. Harden's played 50 games.
Yes, he has.
So he's more than those other guys. And then I punished Kawhi and Braun for playing in the 40s. So my forwards are Kawhi and LeBron, then Embiid's my third team. I think within a player or two, we're going to be the same top 15 in some order, right? Unless you don't have Zion in your third team.
So third team, obviously Gobert's there, and I have Zion and Jimmy Butler as my other forward.
He was my next one out. Yeah, I actually have his name.
When he plays, the Heat win. When he doesn't, they lose. Yeah. So I was like, that matters. I have Spider Mitchell as one of my guards, and another guard who's not getting a lot of talk, but damn, he's playing well. Ben Simmons. Like, I got him on that third team. Now, here's what's interesting.
Over Harden.
Yeah, and I love it.
You may lose your credentials.
I might. They might take me out. I did an all missed games team.
Oh yeah.
I might just take my all games missed team. KD, Durant, Kyrie, Harden. I think I might take that team, and I'll be fine.
It's so funny you did that, Jarod, because I literally thought about writing you. Like, we should do a team of what it would be if injuries didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because it really is the defining story of the league of this season. It's not the Jazz. It's not the Suns, small market teams, Zion. No, it's injuries.
Yeah.
Right? COVID protocol and injuries is the story.
It's been rough. And really, God, I mean, playoffs. Could you imagine somebody just messes around and finds himself in COVID safety protocols in the postseason? Like, that's a series. You're done. You were out for a series, and that might make your team lose. Like, whew.
Yeah, and on the subject of playoffs, we have 2 more thoughts. One is, Judy, under Magic Times Are Coming, I was on Twitter today looking at Mel Brooks stuff, and just because my timeline's mostly basketball things, someone had the Damian video where he hits the game winner. I don't remember when he did this because he's done so damn many of them. He's got that great look in the dog pile. Like, we have to remember how magical NBA playoffs are. People talk about the NCAA tournament, it's one and done, there's so much more drama, and I get all of that. But I've been watching NBA playoffs now for a long time, and almost every night there's something magical that happens. It isn't always a game winner. It might be 5 plays in a row that ended a game with 3 minutes to play. But I still appreciate the greatness of those moments by the world's greatest basketball players. So that I'm excited. And I love the NBA schedule. For me, I don't get tired. The players get tired. But in the playoffs, there's games every night. And yeah, it's a really special time if you love basketball.
The other great thing about the playoffs, Coach, that I love is the drama within the series, right? Like, team goes up 2-0 or you steal that home, and it's like just how it just seems like, man, like, you as you watch, you're like, oh crap. I come in thinking this team's got it. And then it's like 2 games in, you're like, maybe they don't got it, right? Like, you're just, it's amazing. And we do this thing collectively with our psyches because our minds only remember the winners, right? So we go, oh man, Warriors, whatever, unbeatable, blah, blah, whatever. I keep going back to that first Kevin Durant year, that Western Conference Finals. That was an incredible 7-game series. Yeah. The Rockets had them literally on the ropes on a knee. Right? Like, literally, like, make a 3 and bam, down goes the champ, right? Like, they had them on, and it's like, Chris Paul tweaks his hamstring. But our brains, oh yeah, whatever, the Warriors were inevitable, but they really weren't. They were that close from getting killed.
Exactly right. I always say these are not Hollywood scripted events. These are live action sequence events that are happening in real time, and we don't know the ending. That's what makes sports great. We don't know the ending. It has to be figured out, right? It has to be figured out. That's why there's always hope, right? There's always hope. Except when Henry called me after Portland beat LA in game 1 last year, he was so excited. I think he called me after the game that night. He's like, should I go to bed excited? I'm like, no, I think it's over in 5. Like, I think that's the best Portland could play. LA wasn't fun, whatever. I don't know what I saw. Whatever I saw, I told him. He's like, oh, damn it. Yeah, like that's just a harsh reality. But injuries do happen, right? I mean, the Warriors melted in front of our eyes twice. Of their 2 losses in the 5 years that they were made in the finals, it was the Draymond Green suspension, Bo gets hurt, Curry's ankle, right? And then, of course, it was the Toronto one where Cousins goes down, Looney gets hurt, Clay, KD, and they still went to 6 games. Like, stuff happens. So, all right, last thing is you've seen the movie, what is the movie with Al Pacino where he's blind? I just gone blank. He's blind. He's the military guy, and hoo-ah, where he says that. There's no way you haven't seen this movie, Judy. Someone here watching knows the movie I'm talking about.
Son of a woman.
Son of a woman, of course. Right.
In my brain, I was like,
yeah.
What?
So there's this great speech at the end of that movie where the guy that he was his ward when he was going to New York City, his guide, he says to the committee, Al Pacino does, as this blind war veteran, you hold his future in your hands, committee, like protect it, right? He talks about that. And so that's what I thought of when I saw this morning Kevin Porter scored 50 points. This is last pick of the first round from USC because of some behavior, intelligence, emotional IQ issues potentially at USC. He was 18 years old. He's the last pick of the first round. Some things happen. It doesn't really bear repeating. Some things happen. He screwed up. He was 19 years old, and now he's with the Rockets. And he just scored 50 points in a game. And so in my mind, I was thinking, if I was his dad or his agent, I would call up all the executives with the Rockets and say, you hold his future in your hands, committee. Protect it. This is a guy that scored a 50, and he had never scored more than like 25 or 27 before. He's really talented, okay? He's not a perfect young person. Those guys don't exist anyway. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it from the standpoint of, all right, we know what we can do. What can we do to invest in this young man as a human being and as an athlete and as a physical specimen that can break down also mentally, physically, emotionally? How can we build him? If you look at him that way, we might have ourselves a hell of a young player on a team that is desperate for one right now. So that's my thoughts anyway.
If the Rockets, because clearly they're in rebuild mode, right? It's very obvious. Between him and Christian Wood, by the way, who had a 30-something point game. That was
very good. Yeah.
You seem like you have 2 players who could be part of some future. To your point, Al Pacino and Son of a Woman. Hold on to that future, right? You like, I'm not saying put them in bubble wrap and like whatever, but invest in these young men and their futures, and not just on a basketball court, their development. Coach always about player development. Yeah. On court is one part. Who they are as people and human beings away from basketball. The teams, look, that may be the next frontier, right? In team skills and how you get better. The next untapped market, right? How do I? Because it's hard when you got veterans and older guys. They're not doing any of that stuff. But what can I do on my team with young guys, right? To get them developed as well-rounded human beings, because once they get that part and they realize their responsibility and all those other things and they mature, basketball is going to come. We know that. And when you put those 2 things together, that's when you have elite basketball players and you got wins and you got good things coming in your future.
You said it perfectly, Jarod. We'll leave it at that. I think I'll be 80 years old if I'm lucky enough to live that long, and the team's going to offer me $10 million to teach them how to do what I've been doing my whole damn life. Because I don't want to work for a team for a lot of reasons, but I'd have trouble turning on $10 million. And by the time I figure it out, I'll be ready to retire. I won't be able to do it anymore. It's so important. And your favorite player, Michael Porter Jr., is developing right in front of our eyes. I have been a critic of him, his defense and his emotional IQ. He is growing up. That's why Denver's a scary team. Kudos to Denver for what they've done for Jokic, for Murray, now with MPJ. They're doing it the right way. We'll see how Houston handles it.
Michael Porter Jr. love. Woohoo!
For sure. He deserves it. He's earned it. He's earned it.
All right, guys. Have an awesome weekend. We will see you on Monday with Tom Haberstra. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Coach. Thank you, Judy.